What's up, guys? Today I wanted to talk about speedrunning and boredom. There's a message here that I saw in the Spyro Discord by Galaxian that says, "Who else finds no resets and continuing bad runs boring?" While there's value in finishing runs sometimes, runs that are so behind that there's no chance of redemption, they end up feeling so unengaging and like a nothing burger. That's why I prefer to personally reset. I find it more fun to reset more frequently finishing good runs than deal with unfun and below average no resets. If I can still PB, then we obviously play it out. Now, I don't have a problem with this outlook at all, and I think this is a really common viewpoint and perspective for continuing runs, is we're only going to continue a run if it can either be a PB or it can be a near PB, and ideally, you're playing a game in such a way that most runs that will apply to. Unfortunately, in speedrunning and for a lot of games, there's so much randomness involved and so much extraneous factors, including our feelings, that are going to really get in the way of that approach. And I just kind of wanted to touch on a few different perspectives in this regard that really go against this viewpoint that's so common in speedrunning, as well as kind of talk about the validity of resetting and no resetting, and talk about more what the core issue is with the entire sentiment of resetting or not resetting being boring. So if you're a fellow speedrunner and you get bored during your runs, why is that? Well, usually the answer is that you're so far behind that you can't PB anymore, so that the game just basically feels like you're pointless. It's a pointless run because you've done it so many times, and unless it's a PB pace, it's not worth continuing. But let me pose an interesting alternative situation here. What if you're resetting so much that you can't get out of the first 5 minutes of the game? Well, is that not also boring? So boredom is a thing that can occur in this hobby whether you're resetting a lot or not resetting at all. So if you're bored or the run's feeling pointless or tedious, I think there's something deeper that's going on there about our self-outlook, about our gameplay and how we're approaching the game, more so than about the resetting itself. So let's dive into that by asking, what makes speedrunning fun? It's that we're always challenging ourselves, always improving and pushing things a little bit harder, slowly ascending this mountain of new PBs and gradually just becoming more and more at one with the game. It's a really exciting thing, and contrary to what you might think as a casual player, playing the same game thousands of times doesn't get boring so long as you're constantly challenging yourself and constantly improving. But despite this, boredom still happens when you're on the middle of a really intense grind and a run either sucks or you can't get out of the early game. So there's a conflict there between our motivation to play a game always keeping things interesting and our actual grind itself kind of putting us at a standstill and a halt in terms of emotional capability to enjoy what we're doing. So it's for this reason that I want to introduce some copes for both feeling boredom while resetting and not resetting, and getting to the core of why we feel bored in the first place. If you're resetting a lot and you're bored, one justification or cope that you can give yourself is that you are only one reset away from the run of your life. And in that way, you kind of stay engaged and you never kind of stop trying, really. This can cause a reset vortex effect where you just keep on going, your mind slowly dissociating into the first 5-10 minutes of the game as you start to dwindle into other places mentally, going through the motions of pressing the button to reset reactively rather than really thinking through what you're doing, eventually maybe paying off in the end. On the other side of the spectrum, if you're no resetting and you feel bored or it feels pointless, the cope there would be that this is good late game practice, and more so it's good mentality practice, learning how to deal with mistakes without letting them spiral into huge extraneous when it rains it pours type of mistakes. And this is where I think it gets really interesting when it comes to speedrunning. It's that no matter how good or bad your run is, there's always a reason to continue, and there's always a reason to reset. To this end, there is no wrong decision when it comes to resetting, only ones that are going to have different implications on your self-image and overall happiness. But there's something beautiful about that, is that we can control our own self-image and control our own emotions in a way that we can't always control how our run goes. So really, resetting is less about the game going good or bad and more about your emotions being regulated and under control. Here's a good example of that. Here I am on a run early on in my grind that makes a mistake that essentially costs me my PB. I have to decide in this moment whether I think it's worth it to reset for the PB, or if I want to continue for the sake of just being able to play the game and have fun and get through it and practice that mentality. Now, let me reiterate that there's no correct or incorrect answer here. The only right answer is going to be the one that makes me happier in the end. And not every speedrunner would agree with that, actually. Some would actually say that the effectiveness of a PB grind is more important than one's own self-image or happiness. I'm happy to delve into that topic in another video. Let me know in the comments down below. But let's get back to whether I reset or not here. What I don't do is, after making the run-killing mistake, is hit the reset button right away. I'm not reactive. I instead keep playing through to the end of the level, sometimes querying my chat room, and really just having a dialogue with myself about whether I want to continue or not, based off of factors like how early in my grind is it, do I want to reset more or less today, and how am I going to feel when I hit that button and go back to the main menu. After weighing all of these feelings, but before resetting, I make it to the end of the level and decide, hey, I'm not that far behind. I'm just going to keep this run going and see if I could still get a good time. This is what I would call a proactive approach to resetting. Most speedrunners have a reactive approach to speedrunning, where the moment their run is not PBable, they hit the button. But what difference does it make that you hit the button right now or in 30 seconds after you really assess how you feel about the run and get past the initial pain of throwing it? It's important to remember that we are emotional creatures, and to keep our emotions in check, we need to give ourselves a moment to process things that are happening. And by just taking a moment and finishing out the split or the level that you're in when you make a big run-killing mistake, that could be the biggest takeaway that you could have from this video in terms of knowing when or when not to reset. Because hey, even if you make it to the end of the level and you're still not feeling the run and you're just over it, well, now you feel more justified in the reset, and now you can get into the run more confidently, knowing that you're on the right track. What we're doing with this process of proactive resetting instead of reactive resetting is being honest with our feelings. And you might think, why does that matter? Like, why do we need to be honest with our feelings? The game doesn't care about our feelings, and I don't need to necessarily be happy when I'm playing a game. But what that outlook misses is that speedrunning is full of negative feedback loops. It's very common that when you make one mistake, it can turn into many, many more mistakes, seemingly completely unrelated, but just a flurry of unluckiness just completely consumes you like a rain cloud. But you see, it's not a coincidence that you make multiple mistakes back to back. When you're getting salty with the game and getting mad or mauled or quietly just kind of like being like, fuck this, trying to subconsciously play the game even harder with each mistake made, causing a negative feedback loop. And this is one of several examples of negative feedback loops. Another one is when it comes to negative self-talk overwhelming your psyche. When you start saying, oh fuck, this mistake is so bad, and fuck, this other player wouldn't have done this, I can't do it. What ends up happening is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that you end up hating yourself so much that you just end up playing worse subconsciously. Now this is where it gets to the topic of boredom. If you're noticing some boredom or tedium in however you're playing the game, and this goes for any emotion, but for boredom specifically, you need to address why am I bored and how can we change the approach to make things a little bit more interesting, to spice it up a little bit. Sometimes, in the case of Galaxian's message, it's as simple as just hitting the reset button as a way to sort of mentally reset yourself into your next run. And that could actually be a really helpful thing to help avoid negative feedback loops. But then take a player like myself who sees a boring no reset as a challenge to try to overcome a sort of mental block that's sort of affecting my gameplay. Why is the run boring? What can I do to make it less boring? Maybe I can talk about some random ass shit to my chat room, or just be quiet and settle into the game and try to be okay with the mistakes. These are things that make the game less boring without having to reset, but require a little bit of emotional regulation. The key here isn't whether we're resetting or not resetting, but that we're honest with our feelings in the moment and not acting reactively when it comes to resetting, but instead thinking through our feelings and every possible kind of route we can take in that regard and choosing the one that's best for our overall psyche so that we can play the game as best as possible. No reset or reset. And as a viewer, I do believe that this is the most interesting part of speedrunning. It's not the gameplay that's happening on screen. It's what's going on in the player's head that you can see occurring and melding and changing in real time on a live stream. I mean, it's pretty intense, not to mention all of the extraneous factors like chats and people telling them to reset or not. I mean, there's a reason why players that have, you know, the mic and webcam are generally getting more attention than the ones that don't. It's not because we're characters on our stream. It's because we're giving you guys a clearer viewpoint into our psyche while we're playing. And resetting and not resetting is merely a symptom of this psychological approach. So be proactive with your psyche and honest with your emotions when you're playing and speedrunning. Don't put them aside because you feel like it's better for your PB grind to just reset every run that can't PB. That is a small brain approach. A big brain approach is saying, I want a PB and I'm okay with resetting every run that doesn't PB. Are you okay with your approach? That's the real question. Well, that's going to be it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed this sort of deep dive emotional analysis on speedrunning. This is really what makes the hobby so interesting to me, as I said, and if you want to see more videos like this, talking about the deeper emotional aspects, things that go beyond just the game itself, and just overall mental help type videos that I think many speedrunners need to hear, let me know in the comments down below if you want to see more content like this. But until then, my name's Dayoman, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Damn.